Jeff
I'm glad this isn't live. Let's start over.
Let's start over. It's only 5-6 minutes into the show after the top of the hour.
Before we go any further, can we do our secret word? I have a secret word.
You want us to guess the secret word?
Well, here's how this is going to work. I really can't hear anything in my ear.
Can you really not? You want me to turn you
here's
up a
how.
little bit
Okay,
there?
that's perfect. That's perfect.
Okay.
So here's how this is going to work. I have a secret word. If either of the two of you say this secret word, the first one to say it within the duration of this this lovely radio program will win a prize.
What do we have? What's the prize?
Ooh,
you will win a certificate for a free sub from our friends at Firehouse Subs.
Ooh, I like those. Those are delicious.
Can we find those right here in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, Jeff
You
Robbins?
can. I believe they're over on Grand Avenue.
Okay, can
you guys avert your gaze for a minute?
No.
I'm sorry, what?
You can't look. I'm going to show this to the camera.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
All right.
This is a TV exclusive.
I'm gonna eye the camera here.
The secret word for tonight is
the password is nipple.
no,
nipples taste like.
Okay, there you go.
There we go. You got it?
I'm good. So good luck saying the secret word and winning that prize, Anthony and Jameson.
All right. Very good.
Can't wait.
Okay. So
pterodactyl.
Are we? Yeah.
That's how the show works now.
Is it Pussycat?
I really want that.
Is it Josie and the Pussycats?
All right, who's starting this show off? We should get this thing rolling with a bang.
We're gonna get this
slow
thing rolling
start
with the band. Jeff, we're already. It's gonna be a 2-hour show, I think. No, it's not. All right, Jameson, are you leading things off with
could
your
be a
top
2-hour
10
show,
list?
but let's hope it's not.
I could lead us off.
Does that mean we go this way and I'm last?
You name it.
All right, we'll go this way.
Okay. All right, so my number 10 for 1970 is a group. It's 5 brothers who got together to sing some songs. It is the Jackson 5. 1970 was a huge year for the Jacksons. The Jackson
Did
5.
they
The brothers
form in
Jackson.
1970?
They didn't form in 1970. They had actually started performing.
It's when they met each other.
Yeah, they had started performing, but 1970 is when they were signed by Motown. In January, they debuted on American Bandstand.
Okay.
They performed their first concert under the Motown label.
Really?
Later that year.
Okay.
And they had 4 hits, 4 songs, 4 consecutive songs that went to #1. The first group to ever have 4 consecutive #1 hits.
What about the Monkees?
You have they had "I Want You Back."
Yeah, heard
They
that.
had ABC, which knocked the Beatles out of the #1 spot.
Hearing that right now.
"I Love You."
How's that one go? I'm not familiar with that one.
I love you. Save.
I Love You. Save.
Maybe it could have been a spell check error on my iPad here.
It's pronounced Save.
I love you something, and I'll be there.
Oh, the classic.
Of course. And I mean, they were at the top of the charts with 4 #1 hits. Michael Jackson was 11 years old at this time, with his brothers being punished to get out on stage by Papa Joe. But I mean, they came on with a bang and just dominated record.
Oh, wait. Are you talking about the song that goes? And I apologize to the listening audience. That's "The Love You Save May Be Your Own."
The Love You Save.
Thank you.
Yes.
I apologize for that.
I can't read either. Yes, "The Love You Save" and "I'll Be There," ABC, and "I Want You Back." 4 consecutive #1 hits, something that no one had ever done previous to them. Not even those Beatles. Yeah.
From Gary, Indiana.
Right. Beautiful town, Gary, Indiana. Great tourism district.
Today, okay, I got to ask you guys this, because this comes up on our show now that we're talking about Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana Cheesecake. Are you guys familiar? Do you know what it is?
No.
This is something I saw today at an establishment in the Madison area, or the Sun Prairie area, I should say.
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
Me neither. I still don't know. I was afraid to ask. So if you know what Gary, Indiana Cheesecake is, they can get us on Facebook, or no? They can.
Facebook's crashed. Sorry.
Facebook's crashed. Just
what?
Just don't even bother. Just don't even bother.
Live has crashed twice now.
If you know what Gary, Indiana Cheesecake is, just don't bother. Or you can call the show 608-825-0930.
Jameson, do you have a favorite Jackson?
I mean, outside of Michael.
Well, you can include Michael, but that's the boring answer.
Yeah, how about Marlon?
Anthony?
I'm a Tito guy.
I like Randy.
He got a
Randy
good head of
Jackson.
hair on him. I'll give him that.
Big fan of Randy.
I'm sorry. Who was your choice, Jeff Robbins?
I said Randy.
Sorry, that's incorrect.
You having some butt stomach issues over there?
The buzzer.
Randy Jackson, great job. Okay, bassist
That's
for,
right, dog.
for Journey for a couple months.
That's the Randy Jackson, of course.
Do you want to log Jeff Robbins in this video?
Do I want to tag Jeff?
Oh,
Robbins
tag?
in this
No,
video?
please don't.
No, I'm not tagging you. There you go. I know you're incognito. You don't want anyone to know about this show. So
I'm not supposed to be here.
Exactly.
You playing drops now?
No, I'm good.
We've become full morning zoo radio now. That's it.
Just trying it out. Hey,
There's slide whistles going on in the background.
that's how Jeff Robbins described our radio show.
This is
too.
what we've done.
A group of investors.
Oh boy, and they want to invest into this show.
It's like the evening zoo.
The
He
morning
said it was
zoo.
like the morning zoo.
Absolutely. All right, that's what I got. Number 10, Jackson 5.
All right.
I love it.
I'm ready to move on.
Who doesn't love the Jackson 5?
Who doesn't love the Jackson 5?
See, he's slowing down, so we'll do a 2-hour show.
That's
his-
no,
that's-
He's
I'll
grinding
get it.
this thing
That's
down.
his
Whatever.
secret
You're still
weapon.
creating your list, Anthony? What's going on?
No,
here?
I know what I'm doing over here. What are you guys doing? Am I next?
Yeah, we're doing
Yeah.
this kind of a thing
Oh,
here.
okay, this kind of a
Clockwise.
thing. For my number 10, I'm going with a theme park, and there's a Wizard of Oz theme park called Land of Oz that opened in 1970 in the Carolinas and was supposed to be, I guess, their answer to Disneyland or Disney World, which didn't work out so well because it was closed within 10 years. I still love the idea of this. Had they had maybe more things out there than one successful movie from 35 years earlier and some books, then maybe they would have had a shot, but that was not the case. So I'm going with Land of Oz for my number 10 of 1970. Are you guys familiar with this? This has kind of become a place that, so it's still there, but it's been abandoned. So it's on like some of those, one of those lists for like creepiest place in the United States or places you should check out. So
So it's not there anymore.
it is there.
Just some abandoned.
But you don't have to pay a ticket, and you have not had to for nearly 40 years. But
bunch of Lollipop Guild kids just wandering around aimlessly.
there you go.
Where is this? Where is this located?
Or munchkins.
I believe that is in North Carolina.
How did Land of Oz deal with the recent hurricane? You have the latest on that for me?
No, nobody's. It's
A lot of flying monkeys were lost in that tragedy.
I can say this, that they are no longer in Kansas.
There you go.
All right, there you go.
There
Nice.
you go. My number 10, Jeff Robbins.
That's our
What do
next
you
road
got?
trip.
Oh, there. Now we're talking.
My number 10, hi. This is Jeff Robbins coming at you. WLSP LP,
Oh, boy.
Sun Prairie. My number 10 is two films that have a lot in common that came out in 1970, and they are the film of the Woodstock Music Festival that took place the year earlier, and also Gimme Shelter, which also took place the year earlier, but both films came out in 1970. Both entertaining films in their own right. Woodstock can actually, I think, be regarded as sort of the a template for what concert movies would become. It was very innovative editing in that film, a lot of split screens, a lot of, I mean, it's for a 3-hour plus movie or however long it is, because it's a long film. It
Well,
goes,
there's multiple cuts of it too.
yes, that's true.
3 different cuts of the film.
Every time it comes out on, every
They
time
just
there's an
had the footage
anniversary,
more footage.
there's we found some more footage
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Richie Havens shaving backstage,
Yep.
and yeah, we'll throw that in. So, but it's a fun movie, and I believe it won actually for best editing at
It
the
won
Academy
Best
Awards,
Feature-length documentary, and it won best editing, I believe.
and it won won best film editing at the Academy
Well,
Awards.
and you know who one of the editors was on this film?
Martin Scorsese,
Absolutely.
and somebody that he would work with quite a bit, Thelma Schoonmaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So that's a fun film, and then Gimme Shelter is also a very interesting film, as it basically depicts on screen the death of basically the murder of a concert goer at that Altamont concert. And then what's interesting is you see Mick Jagger watching a cut of the film and watching the murder take place, and it's a very interesting perspective on the happenings, because he's looking at the final cut of a cut of the film supposedly, and his reaction speaks volumes to what had happened. So two very related films, obviously, but two very interesting films that I would recommend checking out. Woodstock and Gimme Shelter from 1970. That's my number 10 on my list.
Do you know who one of the cameramen was for Gimme Shelter? Went on to do big things?
Well, the Males brothers directed that film.
Right.
One of the cameramen
Yes.
Was it Bill Nye the Science Guy?
It was a very young George Lucas. Was one of the cameramen
you
there.
are. Yes, I have heard
Camera
that.
jammed, and he wasn't able to get any footage. He was out there with the camera that
He'll never
couldn't
amount to
jam.
anything, that George Lucas.
So, those Maisels brothers were incredible. Like the greatest documentarians
What a
ever.
nerd.
So good. All right. So that was your number 10. My number 9 is sports related. You're going to love this, Jeff. Here we go. Oh, let me get this spun around here. Okay, so my number 9 sports related event is Doc Ellis, pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates, 1970. Had the day of his life, something that most major league pitchers would dream of doing. He threw a no-hitter against the San Diego Padres on June 12th. Unfortunately, he doesn't remember much about it because he was on LSD. Doc Ellis went to a friend's house, took 3 hits of acid, thought that it was a Friday, but found out that it was Thursday, and he was supposed to pitch after he had dropped 3 hits of acid. He threw the no-hitter despite being unable to feel the ball or see the catcher's mitt. Says catcher wore reflective tape on his fingers to help him kind of see the signs. He walked 8 guys in his no-hitter, just all over the place. But it's an achievement to be at the minimum. And there's a great documentary. You're speaking about documentaries.
I was.
There's a great documentary called No Noah, a documentary, because his name is Doc Ellis. That came out last year. That's really interesting.
Can I get that on the Hulu?
It's on the Netflix, I believe.
Oh,
is
even
where it
better.
was. And people,
Anthony's done many episodes of this program on massive amounts of kaopectate.
that he has.
Oh,
Yeah.
my
I'm sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No. It's interesting because it's kind of become, it was an urban legend. I remember hearing it when I was a kid. Oh, this guy Doc Ellis threw a no-hitter while he was on acid. And then some players said no, but then other players have corroborated his story and said, oh yeah, he definitely was. He was not all there in the dugout. So.
But we need to remind our listeners, do not try that at home.
Right. Do not.
We're not advocating
don't pass
or
the acid
promoting
test.
the use of any.
Yeah, or the kidney stone.
Pass
test.
kidney stones. Not
Just
acid
ask
test.
Jeff Robbins.
Oh boy.
So there you go. My number 9, sir, Doc Ellis.
Now that was sports related.
That was.
Okay.
Is that okay? Is that legal, Jeff Robbins? You got any sports on your
No.
list? I might have something on mine.
I
I'll
have
say
something that maybe partially qualifies.
partially qualifies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
How about you, Mr. Danu? What do you got as your number 9?
For my number 9, I got a TV show. The only TV show, and really, I don't know if I have a movie either. This might be. Well, I'm sorry. I do have some other TV shows, but
Don't give too much away. It's
I
early in
don't
the
wanna- I don't-
program.
Yeah, you're right. I don't want to give up too much. I've got the Partridge Family coming in at my number 9. Jeff Robbins, you okay with that? You a big Partridge Family guy? You Brady's or Partridge Family? Because I remember I loved the Partridge Family.
I like. Who was the name of the manager? I think he was
that your one
played
guy?
by a guy named Dave Madden, who would go
What was
on
his
to
name?
star in Alice, which we were just talking about.
Yeah.
I think his name was Dave Madden.
Yeah, I can't remember his name on the show, though.
I don't remember his name on the show either, but
I'll call him Wilson.
big fan of Dave Madden.
I think the bus is such a cool thing. If ever you guys go to Brewer games these days, there's bus trips is such a big part of it, and you see the one bus that seems to be having so much more fun than everybody, and that's the Partridge Family bus. I always thought, that little redheaded kid was so funny when I would watch this on Nick at Night, and boy, what a mess / awesome radio host he ended up growing up to be. You guys big on
Danny Bonaducci?
Danny Bonaducci?
We're just looking at pictures of your mom.
Oh yeah. Oh, I haven't seen those.
Reuben Kincaid.
Reuben Kincaid. There you go. Thank you. Yes, Danny Bonaducci, great boxer.
Great boxer. Who did he? No, I was gonna say
He's
he
fought
took on
many
Horseshack,
guys.
but no, that was Dustin Diamond who took on Horseshack
Yeah,
in
he's
celebrity
had
boxing.
many celebrity boxing matches. Danny Bonaducci has.
And he's been on Howard Stern's show, and he had his own show for a while
He's got his head on straight.
VH1.
Yeah.
Right now he does.
Sure.
You sure about that?
Didn't he have like a talk show, like a one of those Geraldo type
did.
trash TV shows?
Sure.
Was it called Danny,
think
or was
so.
it called Bonaducci?
It should have been
One of the
Bonaducci
two.
with an exclamation point. Bonaducci.
So there you go. That
We have
is
derailed.
yes, the Partridge Family coming in at number 9 on my list for 1970.
So, have you watched episodes of the show?
Not since I was a kid, but as a kid, I really did enjoy the Partridge Family. I thought this was way better than the Brady Bunch because
Susan
of the,
Day
because
was
of the
so
song. Yeah, there you go. That's a big part of it too. But just like them being a band and singing and the bus, to me it was more fun than the
Danny
Brady
being
Bunch.
the only bassist who strums his bass.
That's right. Get those picks out of there.
He's out there just strumming along.
Yeah.
You're on a bass, dummy.
He had no idea.
He didn't.
That's not appropriate to call him a dummy.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies to Danny Bonaducci if you're
He
listening.
might be listening.
He likely is.
He'll be pounding on the door in an hour.
Listening from the Walmart parking lot
Challenging me to a
in his
fight.
car. Well, that's good. This is your only TV show of this list?
No, I forgot about my number 8. Don't worry about
Okay,
it.
very good.
That's what they call in business a tease.
Oh, he's revealing
Yeah, it's
something.
sexual in nature.
My number, what are we on, 9? 8? 7?
9.
What year, Jeff Robbins?
My number 9 is a album that Bob Dylan put out in 1970, specifically in June of 1970, and it was an album called Self-Portrait, and it's possibly most famous for the review that Rolling Stone gave it, which opened up with the immortal lines, "What is this blank?" a word I cannot say. So Bob Dylan in 1970, by his account, he'd gotten kind of tired of being Bob Dylan, people looking at him for life-changing music, life-changing lyrics, life-changing everything, and he said, you know what, I'm just going to basically put out an album of crap, and maybe people will stop bothering me. And what do you got? What are we listening to here? A little Self-Portrait? Thank you.
This is Wigwam.
Yes. So he adopted, this is, he sort of used his crooning style of singing, which he had kind of started on Nashville Skyline the year before. But like a lot of things, Bob Dylan, it's kind of it's undergone a sort of a reevaluation in recent years, and now people think that it's really not all that bad. And it was the subject of a bootleg series released a couple of years back, and I haven't actually listened to it for a while. I meant to listen to it this weekend in preparation for this show, but I mean,
Nobody wanted to listen to it with you.
I mean, it's all about expectations, right? I mean, if you go into 1970 saying, "Oh, the new Bob Dylan album," it's going to be this is going to shake me to my core, and he's singing old standards and cover of The Boxer. And you're like, "What is this crap exactly?" But you know, when you expect sort of that kind of a thing, it's not that bad. So, and then he would 4 months later in 1970 he would put out New Morning, which again, kind of an understated album, but one that was greeted much more favorably. More of a standard Dylan album along the lines of a little bit like Nashville Skyline and John Wesley Harding. You know.
I like the pull quote for this album from Jeff Robbins is, "It's not that bad."
Well, I mean,
Check it out. It's not that bad.
It's not on my list because I think it's the greatest thing ever. It's just an interesting thing that happened in 1970.
Sure.
Yeah, there you go.
I agree.
So the first time that Dylan was knocked down critically,
Yeah.
1970.
Yeah.
But to believe him, it was all part of his
plan.
plan.
What about when he went electric in 1965?
I think the critics were okay with that. It was the fans that were upset.
All right.
But go back and listen to our last show if you want
Yeah.
more talk about that.
What a show. You can find that on YouTube, too. My
Frony Radio.
Frony Radio. My number 8 has nothing to do with Bob Dylan. My number 8 has everything to do with Dean Martin, because I'm talking about a movie that came out in 1970 starring Dean Martin, Burt Lancaster, and George Kennedy. It was Airport. The first. This is so anti-Airport. The first of the disaster films that would be a hallmark of the 1970s. The Towering Inferno, the
Earthquake.
Poseidon Adventure, Earthquake, all these things. It all started with Airport. You had, and it spawned a bunch of sequels. I think there were 4 Airport sequels afterwards, as well as spoofs. It's how we got to Airplane.
Sure.
Airplane, Soul Plane.
Just a great film featuring this
Soul Plane.
Sorry.
Queen Latifah was
Made a
in that?
mistake there, yeah.
Yeah, she was.
this wild cast.
Kevin
Dean Martin,
Hart, your favorite.
Dean Martin is this boozy, womanizing pilot who's having a child with one of the stewardesses, despite the fact that he's married. Burt Lancaster is the guy who runs the airport.
And Helen Hayes is the stowaway.
Yes, very good. And all of these emergencies. You know, George Kennedy is the cigar chomping guy whose job it is to get this airplane off the runway that's stuck in the snow before the plane that's in the air that has had a terrorist detonate a bomb on it can come crashing down into the runway that this other plane is stuck
So
on.
what's the formula for a good disaster movie that I think this film started?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have multiple disasters going at one time. You have to have like 3 balls in the air at all times.
Right. And a lot of cast, all of which are
big
sort of
ensemble
They're all like
cast.
B-level
Yeah.
cast members.
Big
yeah.
ensemble cast. I mean,
Right.
Dean Martin was bleary-eyed through this entire movie. I mean, he was,
Well.
he was acting through a whiskey haze. I think
He
George
was like
Candy's-
Doc Ellis.
George Kennedy's the best part of this movie. He's so great in this movie.
He's in all the airport films, I believe.
I think so.
George Kennedy.
Yeah, he was such an underrated actor. And you have to have over the top.
Who's better, George Kennedy or George Papard?
Oh, George Kennedy by far.
I don't know.
Jeez,
I'm a Papard guy. Is that the
A-team.
the word of the week?
that's Hannibal.
No.
Should I try it? Did you look at it to make sure?
I came up with the word of the week. I know what it is.
You know it.
I saw you look.
So, anyways, there you go. Airport is my number 8.
Is that your
Good
favorite
stuff.
disaster film?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
I think mine's
I rewatched
Towering
it.
The
Inferno.
first is the
I like
best.
Towering Inferno.
What else? Okay. Do you got a couple other ones? More recent ones that I might be familiar with?
More recent disaster films?
Yes.
I don't
Yeah,
think
I mean
they-
San Andreas.
You big perfect storm kind
But
of
those
guy?
are different types of films.
Yeah. And this was actually kind of a serious film.
Sure.
I mean, now they're all kind of like
Okay.
a little over the top, tongue in cheek. Airport wasn't tongue in cheek. They were just trying to shove a bunch of big name actors who are past their prime into this thing, and let's
Okay.
put you in a situation that's untenable.
All right. That's fair.
Yeah. Then they got crazy once they started moving forward. They just got worse and worse.
And that was your number 8.
My number 8.
All right. On my number 8, I'm going with cartoons. 1970 was the debut of Josie and the Pussycats, the Harlem Globetrotters cartoon, and Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Harlem Globetrotters is the one that I had the most fun watching as a kid on reruns. And I want to say there was a crossover with Scooby-Doo,
Of course there
if I'm
was.
not mistaken.
Of course there was.
And I always loved those episodes with Scooby-Doo when they do either Sonny and Cher or Harlem Globetrotters or whoever might be popular at the
Abbott and
time.
Costello.
See, yeah, there's a ton of great Scooby-Doo crossovers, but that's kind of what led me into the Harlem Globetrotters and then seeing their solo cartoon. None of these lasted too long, and me being someone who
How long could you have a Harlem Globetrotters
Yeah.
cartoon go
I'd-
for?
it's a couple solid
I'd
seasons.
watch it.
And then me being a kid of the 90s, I love and now am rewatching on one of the streaming services
Boomerang?
the Sabrina the Teenage Witch not the cartoon series, but the live action with Melissa Joan Hart from 94, 95. Great TV show. So that's what gave me something that I really enjoyed
I've
on
never seen the
TGIF.
cartoon version of Sabrina. Never. Don't even know
I don't
what it
think
looks
I
like.
don't think it's worth
You
it.
throw that word great around pretty loosely.
Did I say great?
You
for-
did say great.
For the Sabrina the Teenage Witch? Okay. Once again, I was 7 when it came out, and for me, it was pretty great.
What
And
about-
I'm also enjoying it watching it now because there's people like Goldberg from The Mighty Ducks might be on an episode, or you see all these other people that you liked who are child actors.
Nick McKay
So-
with that talking cat.
Yeah.
He's so crazy.
God,
What about
isn't he the
What about
best?
that Caroline Ray?
Now we're talking.
She's a spicy number.
Sure, you rarely see her off of a game show of some sort, but that's the only thing I actually know her from being an actress in.
Yeah, me too, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, that's fair.
All right.
As we listen to Dean Martin.
So what was your number
That's
8?
some
It was
more.
Josie and the Pussycats? Or
No, it was
Sabrina
it was cartoons. So I
Oh,
got Josie and the
cartoons.
Pussycats, Harlem Globetrotters,
An umbrella
and
thing.
and Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Okay,
But
nice.
the Harlem Globetrotters is the one that, as a kid, that I had the most fun watching.
Who's your favorite Harlem Globetrotter?
The bald fella.
Curly?
Curly Neal?
Curly, yeah,
Curly, yeah.
sure.
That's a Metal Arc Lemon
Sure,
guy.
he'd always do the joke where it's not water, it's
Fucking confetti.
Yeah, it's confetti, or then maybe it is water and you don't know. I mean, that's great stuff.
Did you ever
Curly
watch
Neal, is that it?
did you ever watch the sitcom Hello Larry?
I'm a big
with McLean
Washington Generals
Stevenson?
guy.
Just here and there.
Because Metal Arc Lemon's in that, and he's very bad.
Like as a regular?
Yeah, he's like a regular.
Really?
He's like the next door neighbor. No, maybe, or he's the station
I've
manager.
probably seen 3 episodes of that.
Oh, it's bad.
Oh, it's bad.
You got Metal Arc Lemon acting.
I like McLean Stevenson. All right, moving on.
They did what they could.
Jeff Robbins, you have a number 8. I want to know what it is.
I skipped 8 out of protest.
Okay.
No,
Space exploration.
my number 8 is a catch-all. Kind of like you just did cartoons.
Sure, bring it on.
So my number 8 is a catch-all. Talking about this time in the history of popular music. Just bear with me for a second.
I'm with you.
We started seeing albums kind of take over as the dominant form of music expression.
So the old 45s.
So I've got my number 8 is great albums of
Just
1970.
gonna list all the albums that came out. In
I'm gonna
1970.
So sit down, grab a cup of tea.
January 6th, this came out.
Some of my favorites from that year, after the Gold Rush, Neil Young, Cosmos Factory, CCR, Paranoid, the second Black Sabbath album, and that is the classic one that includes Iron Man and War Pigs, or is it War Hogs? It's War Pigs, yeah, of course. Is it Suge Knight or Sudge Knight?
Suge Knight. I love you.
One of my favorites, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, came out in 1970. My favorite Grateful Dead album by a long shot, American Beauty, came out in 1970. Boxer Rain, that's a great album. Loaded, The Velvet Underground, probably one of my favorite Velvet Underground albums. Deja Vu, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. 12 Songs by Randy Newman. Elton John, who was still interesting back in 1970. Tumbleweed Connection, that's a great album. And Stage Fright, the band's third album, is a great album. That came out in 1970. And Todd Rundgren's first album. Todd Rundgren is underappreciated, and that came out in 1970. And that's called Runt. And that's my number 8. Great albums of 1970. Check them out, kids. Stream them from your favorite streaming service.
Yeah, do that. So much to take in there. There's a lot of albums.
They had no connection. There was no connection
trying
there.
to follow the thread. It just came out the same year.
That's it.
Yeah, I love it. All right.
I was... Come on, bear with me.
My number 7 is one that I'm sure both of you will have later on, but I'm going to get it out of the way. My number 7 is the death of two of music's great icons, of course. Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, 1970, both pass away. Hendrix.
This is your 7?
Yeah. Jimi Hendrix passed away at the age of 27 on September 18th of 1970 from asphyxiation.
You can't dust for vomit.
And just a couple weeks later, Janis Joplin on October 4th of 1970, also at the age of 27, died of a heroin overdose. And kind of, it was the end of an era for two of music's, just comets going across the sky. Both of them had such short careers, such young ages. Jimi Hendrix only performed for 4 years, and he blew up on the scene and was gone just as fast. Janis Joplin was, just coming into the height of her powers, I think, at this time. So much potential lost. We were kind of robbed of decades, I think, of interesting music.
And where did most people become familiar with Hendrix and Joplin?
On the Woodstock documentary.
Monterey Pop.
Of course. We talked about that
right, yeah.
in our 1968 episode.
Or 67.
67.
We never did 68.
We will.
Next week.
I keep insisting that we
I'm going to pull that one out. 68 next week.
I've insisted for weeks that we've done it. But yeah, I'm sure we'll have more to talk about with them.
Yeah, I'm not going to mention anything. I'm not going to comment on your selection.
Please don't. I don't want you to. So there's my number 7. Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix. Did. Moving on.
Moving on
to number 7 for you.
All right, very good. My number 7, I'm going with one of my favorite albums of all time, and especially of 1970. This is Van Morrison's Moondance. You got some of his classic songs, And It Stoned Me, Moondance, Everyone. Some of his best stuff is on this album. I think this is one of the greatest albums of all time. I'm sure it's been on plenty of the greatest album of all times lists, such as Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest. This is greatness to me. I'm a big Van Morrison fan. I put him as one of my top 10 male singers of all time. I want to know how you guys feel about Van Morrison and Moondance, the album, and of course the song. Are you more a big fan of the Michael Bublé version, Jeff Robbins?
No, I'm listening.
He's not here right now.
I left this off my previous Diarrhea of the Mouth list of albums because I saw you
putzing
around with it. So I am a fan of this album as well. Okay. But overall, I'm not a huge Van Morrison fan.
Really?
I'm kind of soft on.
But
Van
I do
Morrison.
like Into the Mystic, which is on this album. That's a fine song.
This album reminds me of my childhood, though. I remember hearing this album playing a lot when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were big Van Morrison, and I think that might be part of why I'm soft on him. Is it has a place for me, but it also is but that's my parents' music.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just me.
Okay, so that's kind of where you're at with it. Is that it's something that you're very familiar with, but is not an all-time favorite for you.
Yes.
One of my favorite songs, though, is a song by Van Morrison. It's called "Wonderful Remark," and that's from ~83. It was on the King of Comedy soundtrack.
Ooh. Okay, so you do have some interest in the Van.
Some interest.
All right, that's fair.
All right.
Well, for me, that's my number 7 for 1970 is Van Morrison's Moondance. I'm a little disappointed with both of you.
It's like my dad.
Yeah.
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed in you.
Yeah, it's worse. It's worse. No, I think this is great. No, I think that's fine. I like that it's in my list and neither of yours.
Yeah, that's why we have lists.
That's right.
Jeff, I can only imagine what your number 7 is. Just go ahead and get it right up on that.
I'm just listening to the Van Morrison.
Oh, okay.
Love it.
It's soothing. It's drawing me in. I'm rethinking my Van Morrison indifference. My number 7 is we lost 2 music. Nobody's talked about this yet. We lost 2 musical geniuses in 1970. Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin both passed away in 1970. Believe it or not. And I hate to pick favorites. Hate to choose between my children. But certainly, I think that Hendrix's legacy is bigger, stronger, more all-encompassing, more. So you're playing Janis Joplin, but that's okay because 3 albums. He only released 3 albums.
Mm-hmm.
But since his death, there have been probably 100. I mean,
what do you think has a more lasting impact, though, as far as...
They keep coming out with unreleased recordings of his.
You have Hendrix, but you also have Joplin's impact as a powerful female voice, presence.
But Hendrix is... I don't... If I say to you Hendrix was the greatest guitar player of all time, I don't know that you have I don't think you have much of an argument.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just did things with that instrument that were just amazing,
right,
and still amazing to this day. I don't think anybody's come close. I mean, you got him, and then on a level down a little below, you got Clapton and Eddie Van Halen.
Clap, really?
I'm not saying they're on the same level, but you don't like Clapton as a guitar player?
I'm not a big Clapton guy or a Van Halen guy, but that's
Wow.
I would go
controversy.
Yes, I would.
You don't like Layla, which I mentioned earlier?
Layla is a very good song.
No, I mean the album is very good.
But
no, I mean obviously Janis Joplin has a strong, lasting influence.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not here to diss Janis Joplin, but I'm here to praise Jimi Hendrix.
Okay, fair enough. Sounds like you hate her, but that's okay.
The song. What is the song? That connection. What is that song? Connection of the Two. Pull that up. Pull up a little Big Brother and the Holding Company. Let's hear that.
Connection of the Two.
It's if you come on. Connection of the. Come on, you're pulling up Kenny Loggins. What's going on there?
Kenny Loggins?
I'm sorry. It's Big Brother and the Holding Company.
Sure.
All right, we got some sort of connection.
All right, you'll have to find that later. I don't want to waste time, but that is that is a great song. But I think I don't know. I just don't. I don't have the love for Joplin that I do for Hendrix. And then your number 3, of course, Morrison, who died the next year.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We've already done a 1971 show.
Yes.
Do you prefer Morrison or Joplin, or do you not like to compare apples to oranges?
Yeah, I think it's total apples to oranges.
Okay. Connection of the Two. I just saw it, but forget it. Let's move on. It was on the Cheap Thrills album.
I think all 3 of them were
let's
something
keep going.
very, very different from each other.
Oh, sure.
We're talking about the 3 young deaths of that era.
Right.
I think they all offered something completely different.
Combination of the 2.
What did I say? Did I say connection?
Yeah, sorry. I kept looking past it because I was like, no, that's not it.
But now that I think about this, I'm not even sure that she even sings lead on this song. I just think it's a great. I just think it's a great song.
Like, just keep smacking her down, right? My favorite song is the one that she doesn't sing on.
Yeah.
Boy.
But she had a posthumous hit with me and Bobby McGee.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah, Pearl came out after she died, and that was probably her biggest selling album.
It was. Yeah.
So a sign of things to come from Ms. Joplin. But there you have it.
Jeff said she was better when she was dead.
I heard that very clearly.
I'm gonna get letters.
You are.
Where can they send those letters
about
to?
my
Frony
I'm fine.
Radio on YouTube.
I'm just saying, if you look at my personal physical media music collection, you'll see more Jimi Hendrix than you'll see Janis Joplin.
That's fair.
Thank you.
All right. Is it my? I can't.
I felt
crack into
awkward.
this iPad. Oh my god! I lost my list. Okay. So my number 6 is not a library notice here. Let's see. My number 6 is, I believe, some television shows that debuted in 1970.
Well, catch-all.
Let's see. Is it?
I don't know.
Nope,
you said
it isn't.
shows.
Yeah, it is now because I already said it. So
It's out there, man.
We'll do some mixing and matching.
It's out there.
So my number 6 is TV debuts of some some big shows in their genres. First, Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was such a massive show for its time, featuring a single, never married, working woman. Just an incredible show. Won 29 Emmys. Insane. I think it's one of the great series of all times. One of the best written shows ever, with just a perfect cast for what they were doing. Spun off other entertaining shows. Also, ABC found themselves a flagship program in 1970 that's still in the air today. Monday Night Football debuted, and it just became what they were hoping it would be. It's water cooler show every Tuesday morning. Did you see the game last night? And for the longest time, it was like the massive program. I have no idea why this is playing. What's
Mary Tyler Moore.
Oh, okay.
I did my best. I couldn't find the actual.
You couldn't find Love Is All Around? I mean, that's what you play.
Yeah. Monday Night Football, just, Howard Cosell, the music, or just a ratings juggernaut. Jeff, we watched a little bit of the first Monday Night Football game last year down at the TV.
We certainly did.
History Museum.
Do you remember the teams
It
involved?
was the Browns and Jets.
It sure was.
Absolutely.
Joe Namath.
Also that year, Night Gallery debuted, Rod Serling's follow-up companion piece to The Twilight Zone. Night Gallery is really, Twilight Zone's my favorite TV show ever, full stop. And Night Gallery, I really enjoyed.
No argument there. There's no number 1A and 1 and 1A. It's Twilight Zone.
And then it's a full move to the number 2. I enjoyed it. It's more horror and supernatural things. A lot of using H.P. Lovecraft works for the basis of what they're doing. Also featured, Night Gallery, sir, the directorial debut of one Mr. Steven Spielberg.
Sure. Heard of him.
And then kind of borrowing off of Anthony's list from 1965, the debut of The Odd Couple.
Oh, God.
Yes.
1970.
Tony Randall
Great
and Jack
show
Klugman.
that was reworked many, many times. Is the new Odd Couple still on, the Matthew Perry version, or has that been quickly canceled?
I thought that was Ron Glass and
Matthew Perry had an Odd Couple.
but there was an
Thomas Lennon.
There was an African
Thomas
American.
Lennon, yes.
I love him from Reno 911.
There was an
One of my
African American
favorites.
Odd Couple as well.
There's been like 20 different Odd Couples, but this was the iconic Tony Randall and help me out.
Jack Klugman.
Jack Klugman. Thank you.
Quincy.
Yes. Great show. Love it. Enjoyable. Yeah, I don't know if that new one's still in the air anymore. I watched
don't
one
think it made
episode,
it.
I don't think it is.
and it wasn't good. It just wasn't. So, anyways, those are that's what I got. 4 TV debuts of genre pop.
The new Odd Couple was on in 1982, and it featured Ron Glass and Damon Wilson, who was the son of Sanford's son.
How about that?
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we did it. Number 6.
All right, we're at number 6. For my number 6 of 1970, I'm going with The Grateful Dead's American Beauty. Jeff Robbins, you talked a little bit about this one.
I did. I love that. I love this album.
You lumped it in with you said this is the best Grateful Dead album, or at least your favorite by far. What would be your second after this one?
There isn't one.
Okay,
I'm not
so
really a big Grateful
it really
Dead
isn't
fan.
that
It's
far.
probably the other
No,
one that came out in 1970, which I believe is Working Man's Blues, right?
You might be right about that. But I'm with you. I think this is the best. This is my favorite for sure. I actually discovered this from watching one of my favorite TV shows, which was Freaks and Geeks.
Oh, the final episode.
It is the final episode,
Yes.
which I think is great because the main character really discovers herself as a hippie, and there's this great line about this album. And there's these hippie kids at the school who are talking about why she needs to check out this album, and this was big for me because I was probably 15. I signed a petition for them to release Freaks and Geeks on DVD. It was a whole big deal. I'd never seen the final episodes, and then this was the end of it. And so much of the American Beauty album is on there. And one of the hippie kids says, "I wish I never heard it so I could hear it again for the first time."
Yep,
which I
that's
think
right.
is just awesome. And once I was done with all the episodes, I went out and bought American Beauty at probably Exclusive Company at the time before it closed down in Madison. Wasn't that great? But this is my favorite. I'm a big fan.
You and I have found something in common after
Really?
all this time.
Really? What is that?
I did the same thing. I saw that episode of Freaks and Geeks, and I went out and bought
Really?
American
So
Beauty.
that was kind of your introduction to American Beauty and the Grateful Dead?
Not the Grateful Dead in its entirety, but that album in particular, for sure.
I think that's
When
pretty
they're
cool, Jeff Robbins.
when they're pulling away and you hear Box of Rain.
Yeah, and that's kind of the end of it.
There's not a dry eye in the house.
Yeah, and she goes on tour, I guess, to find herself.
And
follow.
Ripple is on that album too.
Yep,
That's
Ripple's
a great song.
on there. Friend of the Devil, Box of Rain, which you're hearing. Sugar Magnolias, Truckin' is another one off that album. But this is another one that you'll find on.
I think Ripple is the song they play at the end of the episode.
You might be right about that. But you find this all over the greatest album of all time lists. And this is, I think, the most known Grateful Dead album. And this is when they were first around with their keyboardist Pigpen, they were kind of more of a blues band. After he passed away, this is kind of what they became, like that traveling, fun folk band that was known for their wild live shows, I guess. And yeah, this is what has drawn me into the Grateful Dead. I'm with you 100%. I think that's cool that we have the Freaks and Geeks connection, which is really what brought me into this. So there you go.
That's so sweet.
Isn't that sweet?
You
big Freaks and Geeks guy, Jameson?
Yeah, it's my number 4 TV show of all time.
It's in my top 5 as well. Wow, look at you.
What are 2 and 3?
We'll get to it.
Seinfeld.
On this episode?
Seinfeld's up there.
Seinfeld's in.
Big Days of Our Lives guy we found out in 1965.
Still gotta get my soaps in.
Yeah.
Do you have Freaks and Geeks on the DVD or the Blu-ray?
Well, so I signed that petition for them to originally release it, and then I think the day it came out, I got it at wherever it was released. So I had.
Did you get the yearbook edition or the
yes.
standard?
No, I got the full one. I got the original music in there in the book, and all the DVD commentaries, all that stuff. It's super cool to get some of the inside info from Judd Apatow and some of those guys. So,
sure,
absolutely love it.
I think I should have put American Beauty as its own number. You've made me reconsider.
I like
list.
hearing that. Hey,
I like this.
Wow, special.
I like that a lot.
Well, what do you got for your number 6, Jeff Robbins?
Nothing as good as that.
Not too late. You can still scratch things off the list.
My number 6, my friends, is a radio program that started in 1970, and it stayed on the air. It's actually still on the air, but it is American Top 40 with your friend Casey Kasem. Went on the air July 4th, 1970, and it started with only 7 stations, but of course grew way beyond that. I don't have a number of stations that it was on at its peak or that it's on now. It is now hosted by our friend Ryan Seacrest. But man, when I was a kid, a young lad, I would tune in Sunday nights in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and listen to all 4 hours of American Top 40.
It was on Sunday nights?
Well, at least in my market it was. It was syndicated.
Sunday, like noon.
Well, syndicated.
Also a big part of Scooby-Doo.
Casey Kasem. Yeah. So and still to this day, on Sirius XM, you can hear the 1970 versions of American Top 40 every Sunday morning. So typically on a Sunday morning, I'll get up and I'll make breakfast for the family, and I'll listen to an old American Top 40.
There's a terrestrial radio station because there's been a couple of times when I've actually left this show, and it'll be on.
Okay.
And I don't know what channel it is, but I'll all of a sudden hear Casey Kasem's voice, and they're playing something from this day, 1982 or whatever, and it's so heartwarming to hear.
Oh, I
love it. I love it.
And it actually spawned a syndicated TV show called America's Top 10, where I think they went over the top 10 like album chart, pop chart, whatever, and they would, of course, use music videos, and I would watch that religiously. And of course, my favorite Casey Kasem moment of all time has to be the long distance dedication. Come out of a up-tempo song. He got me talking about a dog dying, man. That is the best. That is the best outtake probably of all time.
The smooth Casey Kasem never rattled.
He still sounds smooth, screaming.
It is the best. Oh,
we
man.
could play it.
Just
we can't play it. It's got too many expletives to play here.
Yeah. Oh,
but it's a classic.
Right. It's him dropping F-bomb after F-bomb to his producer.
It's kind of a slow burn. You gotta it really ratchets up. But yeah, I love American Top 40 and Casey Kasem, and rest in peace, Casey.
Amen.
That's my number 6.
My new number 5 is quintessential war films. 1970 saw.
What do you mean new number 5?
Well, because it was originally my number 6.
Oh, okay.
But I couldn't find my list. But quintessential war films. 1970 saw three of the greatest war films ever. You had Patton, which won multiple Academy Awards. George C. Scott was just incredible as General Patton. You also had MASH, which won a ton of awards, spawned one of the most successful television shows ever.
Sure.
And you had Tora, 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 which is an incredible film that shows the Pearl Harbor bombing from the other side. Shows you from the Japanese point of view.
Yes.
And it is just an incredibly interesting film and is a real slow burn, but just a great piece of filmmaking. And I think all three of them serve the wars that they're showing, the men that they're following, and just the different focuses that they have just amazingly well. I think all three of them really stand the test of time really strong.
I don't know.
It's the MASH theme.
Okay, all right.
I don't know that. For me personally, I'm not sure that MASH holds up.
Really?
And maybe it's because I like the TV show a lot better.
Oh, they're totally different.
I know they're totally different.
Donald Sutherland is so amazing.
That football game in MASH seems to go on forever.
Sure. And I remember the first time I saw the movie, I kind of had a hard time because I didn't see the movie until I was about 6 seasons into watching the TV
You're like,
show.
where's Loretta Swit?
And I watched the movie, and I'm like, well, and it's kind of a whole different tone.
Sure.
And yeah, and I'm missing where's my beloved characters?
Gary,
And-
you had Gary Berghoff.
Yeah, but I mean, where's my Hawkeye?
Right.
And it took me a couple of times watching it to really appreciate it. The first time I was just watching, going, okay, so when are my guys showing up? They must be in a different unit. They're great. I think out of the three, I think Tora, Tora, Tora is the best film.
I have never seen Tora, Tora,
It's
Tora, so I
pretty
should check
amazing.
that out.
Yeah.
Can I get that on Criterion?
Yes, Criterion Spine 273.
No, you're lying. You made that up.
Why would I lie?
It's not on Criterion.
Tora, Tora, Tora? I bet it is.
I
I would guess. Well, as we talk, I'm going to look it up right
All right, you talk and we'll look it up.
now.
Or I'll-
You talk, I'll look it
Oh,
up.
that's how it works?
It's got to be your bull. Anyways, so that's my number 5. Quintessential war
There's a
films.
war film that you did not mention that I'm surprised you did not.
What's that?
I'll mention it later.
Okay, then.
Is it the one that Metallica owns?
No, but that's not from 1970.
I think it's 71.
Yeah, that's not funny.
We tried. Is it up to me?
Yep.
All right. For my number 5, I'm going with Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football began in 1970, has given us such amazing moments and television ratings. If your team is playing, you got to check it out. Some of my favorites would, of course, be Al Michaels calling the "He Did What" Antonio Freeman catch from the back against the Vikings, where he gets up and runs for the touchdown. The other one, of course, to me has got to be, I don't know if it was Christmas Eve or right around Christmas or right before, but Brett Favre's game after his dad passed away against the Raiders. That performance to me has got to go down, especially as a Packer fan, as my favorite Monday Night Football performance.
That's why I'll always have more respect and affection, not being a Packer fan, to be totally honest, but while I'll always prefer Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, because I think for that game.
Or really, just the emotional connection?
Just the emotional connection. Aaron Rodgers to me is very much more robotic.
All right,
A great
that's
player.
interesting.
I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a
that's
great
fair to
player.
say. And this is coming from a Vikings fan. Jameson is a Browns fan. I don't want to offend you here, but I am guessing the amount of moments on Monday Night Football is not quite as vast as those.
First game. You had the first game.
Whoa,
Come
whoa,
on.
whoa. The Browns were a staple on Monday Night Football.
He's
throughout the
trashing your
80s.
team.
Okay. Oh yeah,
We went to the AFC Championship
Ozzie
back-to-back
Newsome?
years.
Bernie Kosar.
We were one game away from the Super Bowl back-to-back years. Yeah, we were a staple of Monday Night Football.
All
back in
right,
the day.
okay.
While the Packers were winning 2 games a year, the Browns were reigning supreme.
All right, that's fair.
Absolutely. There's some great moments. I remember one of the early moments of Monday Night Football I remember as a kid was Packers-Bears. William Refrigerator Perry, his first touchdown scored as a running back was against the Packers on Monday Night Football.
Oh, really interesting.
Blasting
Okay,
through the Packers line, yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Jeff Robbins, any other pivotal moments? I know you're not a big fan of putting sports on the pop culture list, but I think this one passes.
I'm gonna refrain from commenting.
Oh, this is
No, go
number
ahead, let's
3
hear
for-
it.
It's number
Let's
3
hear it.
for him. Don't worry.
Let's
It's
hear
coming
it.
later.
Oh yeah, okay. All right.
Don't you know how the show works, Anthony?
You mean there's more?
So Monday Night Football, you're number 5. Da-da-da. Are you ready for some football? A
Are you
Monday
ready for
night
some
party.
football?
Yeah. Whatever happened to that guy?
What the hell am I listening to?
We've only just begun.
He's trying to guess what your next one is.
Did I nail it,
Are
Jeff?
we, are we are we doing a since this is going to be a 2-hour show? Are we doing a musical interlude?
Oh,
No, we're not doing 2 hours.
Love Story, your
I
number
thought we were-
5?
You got some? Oh, because you're getting picked up.
Yeah, unless we're going to Hooters afterwards. Or, I mean, insert sponsor here.
He's got a ride. We got to get out of here. Oh,
okay.
No.
We better pick it up then.
Screw
I was
around
planning to go 2 hours.
Wow, okay.
I can't hear myself. Can you?
Yeah,
give me
that's
a little
really
boost?
loud.
Is it
thought-
really?
I can't hear you over the music.
I thought you guys really liked
I can't hear me at all. Can you give me a boost?
it. You waited till we're
love-
an hour in.
I'd love to hear myself. I still can't hear
I can't hear
myself.
you either.
Am I still on the air?
You're very quiet.
We're going to give Mara some post-production
Okay,
work on this
here we
one.
go.
My number 5 is not the Carpenters, although she has a voice like an angel. But it is music-related. January 26, 1970 saw the release of the final Simon and Garfunkel album, which is called Bridge Over Troubled Water, and is undoubtedly their most beloved, most successful album of their partnership that spawned 5 albums. What I find fascinating about this album, not only is the music great. I mean, you got a lot of Simon and Garfunkel staples here. You've got the Boxer, you've got Bridge Over Troubled Water, you got Keep the Customer Satisfied, Cecilia, Baby Driver. So many good songs on this album. You got 2 songs that actually comment on their impending breakup. So Long Frank Lloyd Wright and The Only Living Boy in New York. So Long Frank Lloyd Wright is Paul Simon basically saying so long Art Garfunkel, because when Art Garfunkel was in school he wanted to be an architect. And he one of his heroes was Frank Lloyd Wright. So he used Frank Lloyd Wright to address the message to Art Garfunkel. And then The Only Living Boy in New York, which is one of my favorite Paul Simon songs, talks specifically about how Art Garfunkel was down in Mexico making Catch-22, which was the other war film that I thought maybe you had mentioned previously, and how he felt sort of that he had been abandoned by his partner. His partner was off making a film instead of making music like he should be. And it was really that pull that Garfunkel had towards making films that really was the final sort of nail in the duo's. What are you doing over there?
I'm trying to get you at a good level with me and Jameson. I know it's a little hot for us, but for everyone else listening, it's better.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So, so The Only Living Boy in New York, Tom, Get Your Plane Right on Time. When they were first performing together, they were Tom and Jerry, not Simon and Garfunkel, so he's addressing him as Tom, which is their old stage name. I know your part will go fine. I know you'll do fine in this movie, and here I am, the only living boy in New York. He's talking about himself, so...
That's sweet.
Yeah, it is kind of
sweet.
It is kind of a moving piece of music. So then, they would perform. They would go on tour after this album, and then they would break up. Now, of course, they've gotten together many times since then. But Paul Simon has recently given what he calls his farewell performance. Although he's going to be on SNL, I guess, in 2 weeks. And Art Garfunkel
he'll be wearing a bottle costume on SNL in 2 weeks.
with Justin Timberlake.
No, you see Kanye last night.
Oh, I
was
missed that.
dressed as a champagne bottle.
I fell asleep early.
Yeah, you didn't miss anything.
Anyway, Art Garfunkel. So there were no rumors about him performing on Paul Simon's last concert. He had a concert the same night in Rochester, Minnesota. So that is my number 5, Bridge Over Troubled Water.
I feel like you're the Art Garfunkel of this show. That's a compliment.
Do you? So have you heard of the comedy duo Garfunkel and Oates?
Garfunkel and Oates. I've seen them.
So who is more critical to the duo success? Garfunkel or Oates?
Garfunkel, 100%.
Because of the
I'm not
harmonies?
sure.
Yes. Those harmonies are so
But
spotless.
Oates plays a mean guitar.
He plays a mean guitar and he's got a killer stash. But, I mean, but Art's a glue guy.
All right, I'll probably give it to you.
Yeah.
But I mean, Paul Simon's done so much good music on his own that
Yeah,
I don't think
he's done all right for
Garfunkel leaving really hurt him too much.
Is he the Jermaine or the Brett?
Jermaine.
Jermaine.
Brett.
Is that a Flight of the Conchords reference?
Yes.
It is. Yeah, nice.
Well, he pulled it up on his
Okay.
screen.
I think
Not as impressive. All right, my number 4. 1970 saw a man enter the charts, the top 40 charts for the first time, and he just didn't leave for 30 years. He stayed in the charts. Elton John had Your Song hit the top 40, peaked at number 4 in 1970, and was on the charts for the top 40 charts for 32 consecutive weeks. And it began a streak that went through 1999 for Elton John of 30 years of always having a top 40 song, 57 top 40 hits during that streak. Pretty remarkable stuff. Really, really impressive stuff. A streak of longevity that I don't know if anyone has matched, of just every year pumping hits. At least one a year, oftentimes 2 or 3 a year.
No, I think that's a legendary streak. Absolutely. Is the last one that he put up there, would that have been Lion King?
No, his last one was a duet he had with Leanne Rimes.
Oh,
I
okay.
can't pull the name of it off the top of my head, but doing my research, that was the last time, and it was like number 32 that year, and then that was it for him. And now he's just been kind of out soaking people for big money to come see him hammer away on the piano.
Didn't he do a farewell tour?
Did he, or is it still ongoing?
I don't know.
I think this year is his final year. I don't know if he's technically done yet, but
so what are we calling this entry in your top 10 list?
Elton John enters the charts and doesn't leave.
Okay.
So this is a great song.
This is a great song.
The man is a phenomenal songwriter. He and his partner, who is his
Bernie something?
Songwriting.
Bernie Taupin.
Yeah, Bernie Taupin.
There you go.
I mean, it was just a great collaboration for decades.
I'm not a big fan of this song, but I do like a lot of Elton John songs. Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatter's is a favorite of mine. Amarina. Lately, I've been thinking. And Goodbye Yellow Brick Road is a fantastic album. Yeah. Love Lies Bleeding.
So we're all three on the Elton John train. However, the Van Morrison, not so much. Is that correct? I just want to see where we stand here.
I don't think for my personal taste, I don't think Elton John's done much interesting past like '82.
That's fair to say. But Van Morrison either.
He made some of his own songs several times too.
Sure.
You know, he'll re-release "Candle in the Wind" and make a ton of money off it again.
The Beatles couldn't make "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds" a number one hit. However, Elton John did.
There you go.
He had some help from Lennon.
That never hurts.
Sure.
It's good to get sprinkled with the Lennon dust.
Have you seen Elton John in concert?
No, but here's the reason why.
Well, you say like
the way that his voice has changed, I'm not willing to pump in that type of money for what I want to hear, which is what I hear now which is your song and that classic Elton John 70s sound. Whereas he can't do that anymore, which is
Did you see his carpool karaoke? Did you watch that one?
No.
Yeah, it's him kind of bailing out on the song a lot. Like, okay, James, you take it. He just doesn't have the notes anymore.
He does not.
He sounds like an old man singing.
I saw him.
It's bad.
I saw him in concert with Billy Joel back in 2003, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was a fun show.
Yeah, I wanted to go to that show, but nowadays,
Kohl Center.
Yeah, nowadays he doesn't. It's not Elton John anymore.
Yeah, that's my issue. And Billy Joel sounds a lot more like Billy Joel.
Billy Joel, of everyone from that era, I think he's aged
the most
best.
consistent.
He's one ugly dude.
He always was a troll.
He's
at least he had hair.
Yeah, no. but still, his voice
sounds pretty good still.
It's really remarkable still.
What about Springsteen? His voice still sounds
he's
good.
always been spitting gravel. He's Bruce. All right, that's my number 4.
It's good stuff.
I got
That's
nothing
good
else.
stuff. I'm a big Elton John guy, so I'm a fan of that one. You mentioned Bruce Springsteen, which is funny to me because my favorite 2 versions of the Santa Claus is Coming to Town song is by Bruce Springsteen, or this one that came out in 1970 from the Jackson 5. This is Santa Claus is Coming to Town. So I'm going with something that Jameson already had, unfortunately. But I'm glad that we're on the same page here. This is the Jackson 5's big year in 1970. So you had singles such as "I'll Be There" and "ABC." You also had their Christmas album, which is in my top 5. A couple other of those would be the Vince Guaraldi Trio, which is funny because we talked about that in our last episode, talking about the Charlie Brown Christmas in 1965, and Mariah Carey. I think those are kind of my 3, but Stevie Wonder's in that mix somewhere. He had a solid year in 1970 as well, but I'm talking about the Jackson 5. Huge year. This is awesome. To me, this is like the funkiest Christmas album by far. I don't know what you guys have on your list, but this to me is
James Brown's Funky Christmas.
Oh, that's a good one. But the Santa Claus is Coming to Town plus Up on the Housetop, which you're hearing now.
He'll always out-funk Michael Jackson.
You think so?
Oh,
what about
one of them's the godfather of funk?
Yeah, I don't know.
We better ask Mark Donwa.
I don't want to
Fully Functional.
Yeah, well, I also Jameson is huge on James Brown, so I don't
number
want.
one
I don't
performer of all time.
I don't want to offend him.
Be careful.
But for me, I'm taking the Jackson 5 Christmas album. Don't be too upset with me, but it's in my top 3. I think this is great
We're doing
stuff.
a Christmas theme show near Christmas?
Of course we are.
Okay. We got one.
Listen to Randy Jackson in there, just getting after it, right?
Oh, stellar.
Stands out in this one.
Good God.
Jackson 5, pretty good.
So there you go. Jackson 5's big year, not just ABC and I'll Be There, but also the Christmas album, Up in the Housetop, and Santa Claus is Coming Down specifically.
Nice. All right.
We on number 4?
We are.
Number 4 is the launch of a network that took place in October of 1970, and that would be PBS.
I was hoping you'd cover this one.
Went on the air, and I don't really have a lot to say about it because what self-respecting child could have grown up with? I'm a little bit older than you guys, but I grew up with Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, Electric Company, 321 Contact,
Telethons.
Zoom.
Lots
I
of
love the pledge
telethons.
drives. I'd watch the pledge drives just
Heck
for
yeah.
bad TV.
Oh, man, look at that tote bag.
And then when I got a little bit older, PBS introduced me to Monty Python.
That's how I discovered Monty Python, was through PBS.
Faulty Towers I watched on PBS. Actually, my local station had SCTV reruns
Love
on
me
PBS.
some American Road Show. Love that show.
That's good stuff too. So that is my number 4, the launch of PBS, and still, there's a lot of channels out there, boys and girls, but come on, help PBS, contribute, donate. We still need PBS in the world.
I agree.
Antiques Roadshow or whatever.
Antiques Roadshow, that's what it was. Yeah.
There you have it.
I'm glad you covered that one. I was hoping.
And I covered it succinctly.
Nice.
Because I know you have some things you want to talk about.
I do. So my number 3, we are hitting the top 3, is kind of hitting on a little bit off of one that you talked about earlier, Jeff. 1970 featured, in my esteem, 3 incredible documentaries. 3 of the great documentaries of all time. You had talked about Woodstock. It's the benchmark of concert movies. One of the most entertaining documentaries ever. Won Academy Awards. It's 3+ hours at this point now. I just watched it again earlier this summer. Over the course of like 3 nights, I was watching it. And
Over the course of 3 nights.
yeah, because the version I had was 4 hours.
Yeah, I got the most recent one. It's pretty long.
And what I loved was my 12-year-old son is suddenly in love with Richie Havens because of this. We watch it. I explained to him the story about how Freedom became a song. Total improv. They couldn't get any of the other bands in because of the traffic. Because they told Richie Havens, he said, "I've ran out of songs." They said, "We can't. You got to stay on stage." So he just started strumming guitar, and suddenly he just created Freedom, which became his biggest hit.
Yeah.
And so just watching that, he's in love with it. I think it's just an amazing documentary, just watching what's going on.
And it's got wavy gravy.
Yeah. Gimme Shelter, which you'd mentioned as well, which is just an amazing thing. The Maisels brothers, I think, are the greatest documentary filmmakers ever. With this, with Grey Gardens and Salesman, I think those are 3 of the most, 3 of the best documentaries ever made, in just an incredible film. And what they're able to capture of watching this crowd just build in anger, and the Hells Angels antagonizing this crowd, and everything that went into Altamont, and then capturing the stabbing on video, and the fallout after that, and Mick Jagger getting punched in the face, and just all these things that happen. And lastly,
There's a lot. There's more tension in that concert film than certainly in any other concert film.
Yeah,
right.
And for my money, what is the most, I think, the greatest documentary series, the most, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. There's a documentary called 7 Up that started in 1964. Filmmaker Michael Apted has this series where he took 14 7-year-old children in Great Britain from all backgrounds around Britain, and as a social experiment interviewed 14 kids, and then came back 7 years later. So in 1970 was the first follow-up. It was 7 + 7.
Right.
And we meet these kids at 14 and we re-interview them and pair it up with previous interviews. And it's an incredible series, and this 7 + 7 is your first revisit of it. And so it's the first one is fine. It's a real short documentary. 7 + 7 then is more, and each one gets progressively longer because they show each previous interview with the kids. So now we just had 56 Up a few years ago, was the most recent one.
Okay.
One of the subjects of this documentary now lives in Madison. He's a professor at the UW-Madison.
Interesting.
And I've met him. And he's got some interesting stories about being interviewed as a kid every 7 years and being like a test subject. Next year we have 63 Up will be coming out. And it has led to this copycat series. There's some in Africa. There's some in all over Japan as a Up series. It's just a revolutionary idea to continue following these kids all through their lives. And I mean, you can watch them and guess like, oh, this kid's a real snob. He's going to grow up to be an aristocrat. And it turns out that it's not that. Or look at this girl. She's going to turn out to be this, and you're not. You can't predict. What the thing is it's trying to see if basically if class and how you bring up a child, determines their future.
Well, how did he pick these 7 kids? Or how many kids was it?
There was 14.
14, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and they were just kind of through a cattle call in different areas. They want to go to a poor part of town. They pick out a girl who's, very well off, and just kind of pick kids, and they pick an African-American kid, and they pick, all this. And now since some have dropped off, one I believe has passed away. I think they're down to 10 that are willing to participate still at this point in their life. It's 63 years old. But it's I think it's a really revolutionary series. So 1970 was the first follow-up of that. It's just a tremendous series. So.
And is that the most entertaining documentary?
Most entertaining?
Well, of the series. Is the second one? Or are you not willing to
I
say
actually
that?
think 21 is the most, when they're 21, the third one, because they've actually become people.
Okay.
The first follow-up is just interesting because you see them go from 7 to 14, but the changes are very rudimentary. But once you get into their 21, you really start to see like, oh, they're starting to discover themselves. They're not who I thought they were, and some of them are embarrassed by things that they said at 7.
I can get Tora 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 on Blu-ray for $10.
Do it.
Make it.
It's
Get
not
it.
Criterion.
Yeah.
Get it. It's great.
All right, we got 20 minutes.
Okay. Well, there you go. That was my number 3. Incredible documentaries of 1970. Thanks for giving me the time.
Cut you off.
No, we gave him lots of time.
No,
I
that's
know.
all I wanted was the time. Thank you.
He did a great job. For my number 3, I've got Black Sabbath. We talked about a huge year for Jackson 5. I got to throw Black Sabbath on there for their debut album, Black Sabbath, as well as the Paranoid album. You're hearing The Wizard right now, Black Sabbath, the song from the band and the album. Also off of that album, one of my favorites. And later that year, in September, Black Sabbath released probably the most iconic of their albums, which is because it has Paranoid and songs like Iron Man on there. But what a huge year for Black Sabbath is. They're really known as the forefathers of heavy metal music, which I'm all on board for. To me, if I were to make a list of like top, people at each instrument, a lot of these guys would be in there. Then Jeff Robbins, you talked about The Who having the greatest rhythm section of all time. To me, I think Black Sabbath is up there. I think Bill Ward and Geezer Butler would also be pretty high on my list for a rhythm section. What do you think?
Disagree.
Really? Not a fan?
Well, I'm a fan of Black Sabbath, but I mean, you're talking about all time. I can't give them that.
Okay, all right. I'm thinking like Bonham and John Paul Jones would be higher than the Black Sabbath fellas, but I still think, especially for classic rock and being the forefathers of metal, that these guys would be on my list.
I mean, the bass player for Hall & Oates does a mean job.
It really does.
Okay.
That guy's awesome, whatever his
All
name
right.
is.
Yes, that's fair. I also like the premise of the band that they used to be this band called Earth. They were practicing in front across the street from a theater that was showing scary movies, and they thought, what an idea. People would pay money to watch a scary movie, and they kind of decided, hey, we could do that. We could play scary music, and there Black Sabbath was born.
Sounds like rock and or roll.
Yes, a combination of the two. Mm-hmm. There you go. Number 3, Black Sabbath, 1970.
My number 3, this is Jeff Robbins coming at you live from 103.5 FM, The Sun, WLSP LP, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. My number 3 is something that you both have already discussed. It is Monday Night Football. Started in 1970. For me, as a young lad, it was the only time. I mean, you had your Sunday afternoon games on CBS and at the time NBC. But you were not necessarily, this is before Sunday Ticket or before Sunday Night Football or Thursday Night Football or any of that. So a lot of times this is when you could see other teams. Maybe
Yeah.
this is maybe your only chance to see the Cowboys or the 49ers or some of the better teams in the NFL, because you were stuck with, depending on where you live, the Packers or the Vikings every week, week in and week out. And not only that, but this was, as a kid, they would run a highlights package during halftime.
Yeah.
And this would be like the only time you.
That's true.
Maybe you'd read some of these things in the paper and you'd be like, "Oh, I'd love to see that play," and then you'd actually be able
Look
to
at
see
Billy
it.
White Shoes Johnson going to the end
You know,
zone.
the next day. You'd have to wait 36 hours until you could see it on Monday Night Football. And also just the Howard Cosell and
Don
Meredith and Frank Gifford having a good time. I mean, I don't think anybody's replicated the three of them. They were
Dennis Miller?
incredibly fun. Dennis Miller was awful. Tony Kornheiser, who I really like on PTI, was bad.
They struggled
Yes.
as soon as they broke up. Even I hated Dan Deerdorf, but I would take Deerdorf and Gifford and Michaels all over again.
Yeah, I thought Deerdorf was fine.
He just infuriated me because he was a big oaf. But boy, then they started rolling in a bunch of schlubs, and I'm like, what happened? Let's get the old guys back.
But yeah. So for me, the teams you got to see, the highlights. I was at a Monday Night Football game in 1983. It was the Cowboys and Vikings. Tony Dorsett ran off a 99-yard touchdown run that was exciting.
Oh, you were at that game?
I was at that game.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And also, this is how everybody found out about John Lennon being shot, because
that's right.
Howard Cosell came across and said, "Got some bad news for you. Unspeakable tragedy. John Lennon shot."
Wow.
It's also where a nation saw Joe Theismann end his career.
And that happened as well.
That was
yeah.
a moment that stood in infamy. Monday Night Football.
And Monday Night Football has not been the same since Sunday Night Football, because, of course, now the game of the week is the Sunday night game, because they can do the flex scheduling and not be stuck with the dogs.
And because Sunday Night Football is on a network, it's on NBC,
Sure. Not cable.
Right.
Not cable.
But that was the thing in Monday Night Football, because they could never change the games, and so you maybe would have some dog
Jets
teams.
and Dolphins, great.
Or maybe you had teams that were really good that they wouldn't have anticipated, and they never got on Monday Night Football. So now, I mean, the Sunday night thing is better. So Monday Night Football is it's almost like an afterthought. Oh, there's a game.
Nobody's
tonight.
watching Sunday Night Football, though. They're listening to their radios.
True enough.
As we talk about things such as my number 2.
So that's my number 3, Monday Night Football.
All right. My number two is one that you talked about very succinctly earlier. It is American Top 40. Casey Kasem, Shadow Stevens, and then now Ryan Seacrest. But for me, it was Sunday, like right after church. Casey Kasem was on the radio. We drive around. We're doing our grocery shopping. I'm listening. It is where we found out who made the Billboard charts that week. It's guessing who was number 1. As he started talking, he'd give these bios and stories about a band or a singer, and you're going, wait a minute, what song is it? The jingles
seemed to matter for some
it
reason.
really did.
Oh,
It really
they're
did.
moving up. That's awesome. Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
The long distance dedication, giving news about this song 17th week at number 1. It meant something. And Casey had that great sign off. Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Loved it. I love it. It's great. And I don't listen to it with Ryan Seacrest. Part of it's him, part of it's the music.
Right.
I don't care anymore. But I love those archived episodes. They never get old. So
Yep.
American Top 40, my number 2.
Nicely done.
That's good stuff right there, Jameson.
Oh, thank you. What do you have at number 2?
For my number 2, I've got something that you talked a little bit about earlier, and that is the death of Jimi Hendrix as well as Janis Joplin. Once again, as Jeff Robbins said, I'm more of a Jimmy guy than a Janis guy. He's going to be the focus of my number 2. He is most people's greatest guitarist of all time. He's the best, right? You guys don't have. Jeff kind of gave us his tiered list, but Jameson.
I concur with Jeff.
Really? That he is the best?
Absolutely.
Okay, I think he is the best.
I think any argument is weak.
I think he's also extremely inspirational. Like, anyone who's played guitar in the last 20 years, even though it's 30 plus years after he's died, like, they still look at him as the guy.
And not a bad singer or songwriter.
No, first guy to use feedback, is that correct?
Great fashion sense, too.
Great fashion sense, yes. Still waiting for a good Jimi Hendrix movie, right? We're 0 for 2 so far.
Yeah, that
Andre 3000 did
one
one.
was pretty bad.
Yeah, they did not depict him very.
Not good.
Yeah, that was pretty rough.
We need to cast Val Kilmer. He does great at those musical biopics.
Oh my God.
Val Kilmer as Jimi Hendrix. I'm in.
All right.
Wow, let's get Billy Crystal. Billy
loves
Crystal loves
blackface.
blackface.
God.
Oh my word! Also part of the 27 Club, which we've talked about in a few years of our list so far for Pop Culture Time Capsule.
Yes, we have. All right. Love it.
All right, your turn, Jeff.
Oh, we're done?
I don't know.
All right, well, thanks
I'm
for
just looking
listening.
at the clock. Say, no.
This
we got more?
is your number 2, Jeff.
Number 2.
My number 2 is something that Jameson Rabbit mentioned earlier, but he mentioned it in passing, and I'd like to. I'm talking about it as a whole thing on my list, and that's the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which I think cannot be underestimated in its greatness and its influentialness, if that's a word.
It is now.
I really don't think that there had been a situation comedy. Maybe the old Dick Van Dyke Show came close, but that was as smart as this show, as well written as this show. Had the ensemble cast that this show had. Something interesting about the Mary Tyler Moore Show that happened. Lovely. When it started, you had her home life and it was her buddy. It was her friendship with Rhoda, and then you had all the work folks, and that was Ted Knight and Ed Asner and Gavin MacLeod.
What a cast!
Yeah, it was an awesome cast, and the show started off kind of rocky. It had an imbalance. Like, well, should we be with Rhoda or should we be over here? And it was really I know some people think the best thing that happened to Cheers was Shelley Long leaving. I think the best thing that happened to Mary Tyler Moore Show was Rhoda leaving.
Go all in on the workplace
They went all in on the workplace. You didn't worry about her dating life. That became a much less focus of the program, and it was
give me more Ted Knight.
Nonstop Ted Knight, nonstop Betty White, nonstop Gavin MacLeod and Ed Asner, and it was all good stuff. When the show started, she was supposed to be a divorcee. But that was too controversial at the time, so she had just come off a broken engagement.
Right.
And it was pretty revolutionary that she was not defined by a man, and she had a career that she took seriously and was usually the smartest one in the workplace. And
she was so perfect in that role.
And most importantly, it was just a damn funny show, and it still is. It still holds up. So
I watch that show fairly frequently.
Yeah, I'm still working through. I'm working through the DVDs. I haven't watched season 7 yet. I still got one season left, but
very cool.
Just classic episode after classic episode. So
excellent.
Watch some Mary Tyler Moore Show, kids, if you haven't watched it.
Yeah, it ages very well.
It has not. Yes, it has not aged poorly.
That means it's me then. Number 1, huh?
Oh, it's time for number 1.
Number 1. My number 1 is kind of like the big mamma jamma of pop culture. This is a show about pop culture. Pop culture is in the title of the program. So in 1970, what would become the epicenter of all things pop culture was founded. San Diego Comic-Con started in 1970. Founded as the Golden State Comic Book Convention, Sheldorf was a man who organized a one-day convention, March 21st, 1970. It's a kind of dry run for a larger convention he hoped to stage. Later on that summer, his first 3-day San Diego Comic-Con convention drew 300 people, was held from August 1st to the 3rd, has grown into the largest convention of its kind in the world. San Diego Comic-Con began as a comic book convention for comic book lovers, has since morphed into the largest pop culture gathering on planet Earth, focusing more and more these days on film and TV. And how comics relate to them as opposed to comics. Now Hall H is all where movie companies drop their new movie trailers. It's now become a 4-day event that has an annual economic impact of $180 million over that 4-day weekend. San Diego will never let it leave. It's where news is broken. It's where fans and huge stars and global pop culture companies all intermingle together for 4 days. It is the mecca for all things nerd and pop culture now. So it all was started in a little hall in 1970.
How does it relate to Wizard Con or whatever that thing is that
Wizard
we do
World?
here?
I mean, Wizard World there's been so many things that have tried to copycat that.
Okay.
I mean, there's 50 different ones now that try and copycat it on a much smaller scale. Yeah, but I mean, San Diego Comic-Con is without question. I mean, it's the biggest thing in the world as far as that goes. Everything else is on a much, much smaller scale. Even like C2E2, which is probably the next biggest one, is probably half the scale.
How does it compare to the Sun Prairie Corn Fest?
I mean, we're getting there. We're getting there. I mean, people can come down and get a picture taken with Mark Ganwa, so that's just as good as meeting Chris Evans.
You got Ryan Martin magic.
That's right. So anyways, that's my number 1, San Diego Comic-Con.
I will say without a second of thought, even though I'm thinking about it as I say it, I did not see that coming.
Good.
I did not see that coming at number 1.
Very good.
So it's your turn, Anthony.
Is it?
Yep.
I guess your number 1 is Three Dog Night.
Yes, I really big on the Three Dog Night. No, my number 1 is going to be the final year, I guess, of the Beatles. Even though they had technically broken up in 1969, it was not official or made known to the public until 1970. Also, when their final album released. But Jeff Robbins, this was not the final album recorded by the Beatles, which would have been Abbey Road. Is that correct?
Si, senor.
Okay, so there you go. I'm not super high on this Beatles album. I think Let It Be is one of their absolute greatest songs, but this album as a whole, not a huge fan. We talked about Beatles movies in recent episodes, and you said that Let It Be is extremely depressing.
I'm hoping it comes out again in 2020 for the 50th anniversary.
All right.
That's what I'm hoping for.
So that's kind of our next shot at it.
Could be a reimagined version, kind of like a George Lucas thing.
Oh, all right. Okay. As if like other Beatles
It's
albums
really not-
hadn't come out,
More
or
CGI.
It's really not that. It's really not that entertaining.
Make the explosions bigger.
with the exception of the concert on the rooftop. But that's been
which is amazing.
repurposed
Sure.
other places. Yeah.
We could
Absolutely.
add in some Ewoks to that concert for sure.
So to me, this is the ending of the greatest band of all time. As I said, not one of my favorite albums. Jeff Robbins, you said this is not even in your top 4. How high is this? Is this one of the lowest on your list for Beatles albums?
Probably right above, no, it's pretty. It's down there.
I agree. I think
Maybe
this
it's above Magical Mystery Tour.
This to me is like the one saving grace of the album would be Let It Be. But other than that, not too much to hang your hat on. It would Get Back.
Come on, 2 of us.
Yeah, it's okay, but I just think there's so much good stuff in those the last 3 albums leading up to this, and then also years before. But yeah, one of the worst. But
Well, this is the project that really broke them up because it was such a miserable project to
right,
work on.
right.
All right.
Jeff Robbins, is this not your number 1?
You haven't asked me for my number 1.
What's your number
Give me your
one?
number 1. Gosh, I'm hoping it's this.
My number 1 is the breakup of the Beatles, which really, really happened, like you said, in '69, and specifically in September of '69. John Lennon told the other 3 that he was leaving the group, and in '69 he put out 2 singles. You know, as if people didn't see this coming. He put out "Give Peace a Chance" and "Cold Turkey" in 1969. So the signs were there that something was happening with the Beatles. But to your point, putting this on your list and why it's on my list, the final Beatles session actually took place in 1970, and that was just Paul, George, and Ringo doing "I Me Mine" for the Let It Be album. And John was not there. And then the world found out about the Beatles breaking up in April of 1970 because Paul McCartney decided to include a little Q&A in the copy of his solo album, and it was a fake question and answer thing, you know, that he had written up. It was not a real journalist who had asked him these questions, and one of the questions was basically, do you see the Beatles performing together again or making music together again? And he said, no, I do not. So he sort of wanted the credit for breaking up the Beatles, which is sort of odd because, of course, everybody hated him for breaking up the Beatles, even though it really wasn't him that broke them up. It already really happened. And he was just on Howard Stern last week or a couple weeks ago, and
Circle jerk, or wait, whatever you want to call it.
he said, I know who broke up the Beatles. It was John Lennon. So he kind of, not that anybody needed confirmation of that, but that's what he. I also really, I know we're running out of time. You got the thing. I wanted to talk about all the solo albums that all the Beatles put out in 1970 as they broke up. So you had McCartney, you had All Things Must Pass, you had Plastic Ono Band, and I think that they really say something interesting about how they all felt about the breakup of the Beatles. You had George Harrison just comes out with this triple album of just dozens of songs, and so obviously he felt very free and released and newly independent, and had just a crap load of songs built up. It's a great album. Plastic Ono Band is a fantastic album. He obviously had a personal statement that he wanted to make, and very personal music on Plastic Ono Band. And then McCartney comes out with an album that really pretty much sucks. I mean, it's got one great song, Maybe I'm Amazed, and the rest of it is just sort of doodlings, not really finished songs in my mind. So he obviously was a bit lost and confused after the breakup, but McCartney would find his footing, and the other two would sort of not produce music that was on a par with what they put out in the wake of the breakup. Of course, Imagine was a fine album, but George Harrison would never come close to All Things Must Pass again, and McCartney would keep at it and keep putting out albums. So December 31st, 1970 is when Paul McCartney sued the other three Beatles to dissolve their partnership. So it really did. He had the beginning of 1970, their last session, the last day of the year, the lawsuit that really officially broke them up. So there you go. That's my number one, the breakup with the Beatles. And nobody said the secret word.
That's too bad. Snuffleupagus.
Secret word was Yoko.
Yoko.
Ah,
All right.
Plastic Yoko
The
band.
prize carries over. Now, let's pull a year, sir.
Who's pulling?
You are pulling the year this time for next week's pop culture
Oh God.
time
Are
capsule.
you all right?
No, pick a certain color.
He knows what he's. This is just there you go. Reach in there. You can find us.
What year do we got?
You can find
I got
us.
two.
Here you go. Ditch
For
one
no
of those.
reason, I'm going to put this one back.
Okay. You can find us next Sunday night.
2006.
Oh, sweet Lord.
2006. I love it.
2006.
Yeah, baby.
Going forward about, if I can do my math, 26 years.
That was-
36 even.
What?
36 even.
Holy, I can't do the math.
That's the year.
36 years.
That's the year I was supposed to graduate high school.
2006. We'll be talking about that next Sunday night at 8 p.m.
that'll be
right
fun.
here on Pop Culture Time Capsule. You can find us on Twitter at _PCTC. You can find us on the YouTube, Frony Radio. And you can find us always on sunprairiemediacenter.com.
Yeah. Oh. Not good.
In the summertime, when the weather is high, you can stretch right up and touch the sky. When the weather's fine, you got women on your mind.